Contractors, on average, lose around 3% of their profit margin to estimating errors. Complex drawings, confusing tender packages, and tight deadlines all contribute to this problem, but they're largely outside of your control. What is in your control is the system you use to estimate. In this video, I'm going to show you a complete workflow using Operum, an AI-powered estimating and contract management platform. The goal is to protect your margins and to ensure that you never underquote again. All of these features you can use within the free tier. Before we jump into the workflow, I'll give you a quick overview of the core features and what Operum is designed to do. Operum helps to quickly summarize and interpret complex tender packages, breaking them down into a simple-to-read dashboard that covers your key inclusions and exclusions, determines a bill of quantity or extracts it from the documents, analyzes your construction drawings to extract relevant pricing information, looks at key contract terms, technical specifications, and any constraints and risks. Also allows you to manage subcontractor pricing by creating a work breakdown structure, issuing tender documents, developing a pricing schedule, managing and tracking all the quotes you receive from subcontractors, and finally putting in comparisons and leveling bids. You can then build construction estimates by creating a project resource library with all your key quantities, variables, material, labor, subcontract, and plant rates, as well as any key subcontractor quotes. You can then put these together into a pricing schedule, generate pricing worksheets where you can compile all these resources, input formulas, quantities, rates, whatever, to calculate the costs per activities. Then once you've gone through and built your entire estimate, you can then apply your profit margin, risk, corporate overheads to generate your sell price, which you show to your client, and then export this to Excel. Then once you've built your estimate, you can analyze your construction estimate for errors. You can either do this with the estimate you built in Operum or upload your own Excel pricing workbook to the system. Then using our AI system, it'll analyze your construction estimate to identify gaps, so missing scope from your estimate, such as missing permits, calculation errors, missing scope, missing quantities, and then it'll go through all the line items in your estimate to check for any calculation issues or scope gaps, and finally, it'll do a sanity check of the rates you've input into the estimate to look for any issues, basically using AI as error checking to prevent you from underquoting projects. Yeah, this is all in a sample project that you'll get access to when you sign up for an account. Now you've got an overview of the core features. I'm going to go through and create a sample project and end-to-end go through the entire workflow. It's going to be super quick, so I don't bore you. I'm going to call the project HV terminations, make it in Sydney, and make the project small. So the first thing you do is you create a project, and now I'll go through and do these steps sequentially, but you can really do it in whatever order you want. The only thing is you have to have created an estimate before you do the estimate analysis. Obviously, that you can create subcontractors or manage a subcontractor quotes without doing the tender analysis, or generate an estimate without subcontractor quotes. So none of it's dependent on each other. First, I'll start with the tender analysis, which all I do is I take my tender documents and I upload them to the system. So this is a sample HV terminations package, and I'm going to upload a scope of works, a subcontract agreement, and technical specifications. I can also upload drawings, but in this example, I'm not going to do that. And click Run Tender Analysis, and depending on how many documents you upload, it'll take between 5 to 10 minutes to run. If you upload a lot of drawings, a lot of information, it'll take longer to run because it has to process more and more information. The less information you upload, the quicker it'll run. Okay, so after that's run, we can look at our tender analysis and we get an overview of the project key information. So inventory, the document we've uploaded, an overview of the scope, the key inclusions of scope, so supply and install 24, 33 kV outdoor terminations, earthing and bonding of terminations, and key exclusions like the supply of cables, civil works, switchgear, and SCADA connections. Now, this was a very basic tender. It was only a couple of pages, but obviously when you have bigger tenders that take more time to process, it's going to be useful just to get the key information. Also, we'll get a bill of quantities. Now, the bill of quantities might be a specific document in the tender package, or it might have to derive it from scope. In this case, the BOQ is derived from scope because I didn't upload a bill of quantities to Operum, but it has given us a bill of quantities, a breakdown of the project for us to price. So preliminaries, project management, site safety and environmental requirements, 36-month warranty, the spline install determinations, spline install of the indoor terminations, and structures and other items. It's extracted the key contract terms. So for example, retention, insurances, the contract type, the warranty period, price adjustments, liquidated damages, as well as any other key terms. It's gone through and found schedule information. So there's schedule phases given in the tender documents, technical specifications. So for example, around testing, we have to get third-party NATA accredited testing, earth resistance, blah, blah, blah. And also any key constraints and risks. So site constraints, any special requirements, financial terms, any risks such as all testing must be accredited, staff must have relevant qualifications. I've just gone through, taken the tender documents and put it into this dashboard. Again, I didn't upload drawings to it, but if you upload drawings, it'll also add in a drawings tab, which has and extracts any key relevant pricing information from drawings. Okay, so after the tender analysis, the next feature I'm going to go through is subcontractor management. So we can also track and manage our subcontractor quotes directly in Operum. First thing we need to do is to set up a project work breakdown structure, which is just a way of tracking all of our subcontractor quotes. I'll create two breakdowns. I'll have materials and I'll have another one, which is construction and testing. So under each of the work breakdown structures, we can create packages. Package is just what we send out to the market. So for example, under construction, let's assume we're using a subcontractor for the HV terminations, and I'll create one called HV termination. So installation of all HV terminations. Subcontract, you can also have a package type self-perform. The reason I did this is so you can track if you're self-performing any works and set up within the subcontract module, comprehensive project work breakdown structure. And I'll put it as status draft. And say I could do another one, which is supply of termination kits. We'll call this package 2, supply and delivery of all kits, subcontract, like that. And one more package, which is going to be, I'll delete that one, create another package, which is testing services. All right, then within each of these packages is where we track and manage quotes. The first thing we can do is we can create our tender documents. I'll say the first one is going to be the scope of works, HV terminations, and we can upload our tender documents here. Could also create another one, which is our drawings, which are HV cable drawings. And here is where we can store our tender documents, and then we can create a pricing schedule. So the pricing schedule, I'm just going to use what we got from the tender package, which was outdoor terminations, and there were 24, and item 2, which is indoor terminations, and there were 12. So this is our pricing schedule that we send to our subcontractor to fill out. And then we can create subcontractors that we want to send this to. So here is where we record all our invited subcontractors. So I'll call this ABC HV contractor, subcontractor 1, and then XYZ HV contractor, or to be a bit more creative with the name, Jim's HV services. Can record the contact details or whatever. And then here is where we can store our quotes. So to add a quote, we just click on the subcontractor and we can fill this out against the pricing schedule that we've created. So say for the 24 outdoor terminations, it's going to charge us $6,000. The indoor ones, he's going to charge us $2,000, but he's got some items missing from his scope. So he hasn't allowed for earthing and bonding. So we want to budget $2,000 for that gap. We can store his subcontract quotes and we can write any notes to help us remember things. And we can also update the existing quotes or add new quote revisions if he sent new pricing. ABC contractor, let's say he's quoted $5,000 for this, $6,000 for this, but he hasn't allowed for inductions, which are going to be $1,500. Now we've uploaded our quotes for our subcontractors, we can create a comparison between them. So we've got the quote Rev 1 from Jim's HV Services, which came out at $10,000, and the quote from the ABC HV contractor, which came out at $12,500. So this is once you had all of the adjustments in here. So you'll see that the $12,500 with the $1,500 adjustment. When we get a new revision from a subcontractor, so for example, Jim sends us a new quote because he's now decided to include the earthing and bonding, we can then update that and the quote in the comparison table will automatically update. So depending which subcontractor we want to go with, whether we want to go with the cheapest one or maybe we think these guys are better, so we want to choose them, we can select our preferred subcontractor and then based on this, create a resource in our estimate. So when we go through and prepare our estimate, we want to include this quote in it. We can either create one single resource for the entire subcontract value, or we can put them in as separate line items into our estimate. This example, I'm going to create separate line items. And now if I go across to our estimate, I look at our project resources, we've got these three resources initiated. We've got these subcontractor quotes. So we've got HV terminations, ABC HV contractor, indoor terminations, and the induction allowance that they missed from their estimate, which would total up to $12,500. Again, if we'd chosen to, we could have created a resource for just a single item in the estimate. Now, let's talk about how to prepare a construction estimate in operum. So it's really basic. You have resources, which are all of your different cost items, which can be labor, plant, materials, subcontract, overheads, and we can also store variables that we want to track within our project resource library. So quantities, productivity rates, or other variables like wastage that we want to just simply be able to edit in one spot and update our estimate. Then we have our pricing schedule, which is our breakdown of the project scope. So again, I'm not going to go through and do the whole thing, but say we want 3 items in our estimate. We have, let's call this preliminaries. And then we want our outdoor terminations. And then we want our indoor terminations. Then we can also have direct and indirect costs. So direct cost is a line item that we're going to create and we're going to show it to our client when we submit the bid. An indirect cost is an item that is something we have to allow for in our estimate, but we don't want it shown in the pricing schedule we submit to the client. So we notice with indirect costs, they don't have a sell price associated with them. So an indirect cost, for example, we could call this indirect 1. We'll call that weather allowance. It's something we want to have in our estimate, but we don't necessarily want this to show up on the schedule we submit to the client, because eventually, once we build this, we have to export this pricing schedule to Excel when we submit our quote. So let's now talk about how you actually build up an estimate in operum. So to make this example a bit clearer, I'm going to change that to 8 weeks, which was the duration of our project. So we need to cover our overhead costs, our preliminaries for 8 weeks of the project, and then click on the pricing item and it gets taken to our worksheet. So for example, this worksheet, the first thing I can do is I can import this variable into my pricing worksheet. So each of those line items we created creates a pricing item. This is now a variable we can use in our estimate. And let's say we have project manager that we need for 8 weeks and their resource, their rate is $2,000 a week. So we have now gone into our estimate and we've created a custom item, which is a project manager for 8 weeks at $2,000 a week. So the cost of this item is $16,000 by 2. Now, this is a custom resource, but we can also add a resource to our resource library for a project manager. So if I create project manager, it's an overhead cost. The unit is weeks and the rate is $2,000 per week. So I can replace this with my overhead item, which is a project manager. And if I go back to my estimate, I look at my project resources and we've got overhead cost of project manager for $2,000 a week. So embarrassingly, that didn't save when I did that. So I'll just fix that up, save that, and I won't rush switching to the next page. So now that's $16,000. And we go to our sheet and we've got a rate, 8 weeks, $2,000 a week, $16,000. If I want to add another item, for example, mobilization/demobilization, we want to make a budget of that of $5,000 for getting all the materials to site. Can add that in. I've done it in the units. It's embarrassing. So now the cost for that is $21,000. But again, I can add more resources, whatever I want. So basically, each of these line items in our schedule, that becomes our pricing workbook. So in my overheads, I've also allowed for that induction allowance, and then I've entered the subcontractor quote we got for the 24 outdoor terminations as a lump sum here for $5,000. So the other way we can generate activity pricing is with an activity template, which basically is for activities we price over and over again. We can set up a reusable template. You can do that for any type of construction activity. It's a really simple example. We're just going to create one for wet weather allowances and call it standard pricing for inclement weather. And then I'll create this template, which is just going to be a custom item, which say total project duration and workers on site as another variable. And then I'll just make that wet weather allowance is going to be a combination of the total project duration times the number of workers on site times 40 times 0.05, which gives you, times 40, which is the hours per week, times, let's say, $80 per hour, times 0.05. And that'll give you 5% of the man hours, 5% of total man hours for inclement weather. So once I've created this activity template, I can go back to my project. And again, you can do this for way more complicated tasks, but this is just a very basic example. Can select and import that template, which is then going to initialize the pricing workbook using that breakdown we've created. I'll just update this for 8 weeks, and I'll update this to say we've got 3 workers on site. And then it's gonna, I should have actually put that in as the rate. I did that wrong. But I've edited that. And then there's our wet weather allowance. We just update those 2 variables for every estimate we do. Obviously, when you have more complicated tasks, we have different types of quantities, productivity rates, and plants that you want to adjust per project. The activity templates will save you a lot of time. I'll just add that subcontract price for the indoor terminations quickly. So these are the quote we got for the 6 indoor terminations. And now we've built up our complete estimate. The last thing we have to do is we need to add on our profit margin. Let's say that's 10%. We want to allow 2% for risk and 2% for corporate overheads. What this now gives us is we've got our cost of doing the work, and then we've now calculated our sell price. So our sell price is a combination, or it's the price we're going to show our client. It includes your total plus a proportional share of these indirect costs. So that $3,840 is proportionately spread across these items. And these all get marked up to get our total sell price, which is the price we're going to charge the client for the work, which we can then export to Excel and get our pricing schedule that we can change, adjust however we want quickly in Excel, and then basically give a broken down price to our client that we can show and submit. We can break this out however we want. We can remove this, change it, only show the sell price, however you want to edit it before you submit it. So that's end-to-end how you build a construction estimate in Operum. The final thing we're going to do is we're going to analyze our estimate for errors. Now, this estimate is going to have a lot of errors in it because it wasn't really priced properly. But what we're going to do is we can use the inbuilt estimate in Operum to do this analysis, or we can upload an Excel version of our estimate. So obviously, because I've built this estimate at Operum, I'm going to run our estimate analysis based on what I put together in here. It's going to take probably for a small project, it'll take closer to 5 minutes. For big projects, it might take around 10 minutes to run. Okay, so now that's run. Let's go in and look what Operum's telling us. Well, First off, it's telling us that one we came up with, it was $42,000. It's identified $145,000 in gaps, and the correct price should be closer to $188,000. It's telling us do not submit. The submission has critical scope gaps, including underpricing the outdoor terminations. We're missing the surge arresters, the lugs, the specialist labor. So it's picked up that we haven't included the materials. We're missing the third-party testing, the indoor terminations, support structures, and any cable support systems like support brackets and cleats. Critical scope gaps, key direct cost items, complete omission of mandatory third-party testing, and our allowances for risk and overheads are grossly inadequate for the project's technical complexity. So let's look at this. We've got the outdoor terminations, third-party testing missing, indoor terminations, the missing outdoor support structures. So it's just giving us a bit more detail on each of these gaps. Then we can also look at the line items analysis, and it's looked at each line item in our estimate. So we had the outdoor, the indoor, the preliminaries, and our indirect costs. And it's just giving us a bit of a breakdown of what it's confirmed is included. So it's assuming the termination kits have been included, but it's not. It's missing the installation by the manufacturer certified HV joiners, the installation of the support systems, any of the materials, any access equipment we need, and any subcontractor pricing. So it's just broken down each of those items, and it's looked what's included and excluded. And we can look at each of these and then make these adjustments. And then finally, we can look, it's analyzed the rates we've used in the estimate. So for example, the project manager, it's saying it's a preliminary rate for a project manager, including all these items, should probably be closer to $4,000 to $6,000 per week. But that analysis is always going to be high level. It's not going to be very specific depending on how much context it has. So it's basically the end-to-end workflow using Operum, where we've gone from tender package, we've uploaded it, we've analyzed it, we've done our subcontractor bids, we've prepared our estimate, and we've put together our estimate analysis with some recommendations. We can go update and fix our estimate and reanalyze it for errors. Again, the goal is to go from initial tender package to a submitted price to our client that we can be confident is accurate and correct. If you've got any questions, just get into contact with me. I'd love to be able to help out.